Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for that very warm CEDA welcome. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my deep personal respects to elders past and present. And I do that not just as the Premier of Victoria, but as a proud Victorian, knowing that our Parliament has taken bold steps towards Australia's first treaty with Aboriginal people. Anthony Carbine's my parliamentary colleague, a parliamentary secretary and member for Ivanhoe is here. If there are any other colleagues, consider yourself duly acknowledged. Richard Bowen, Michael Camilleri, Martin for his introductory remarks and the work that he's doing to build better spaces. And of course to Lynn Cobley. I'll stop there because there are so many other people that I could acknowledge. Thanks so much for the kind invitation to be with you today, to share some thoughts and some priorities and to just set the scene a little bit. Can I thank CEDA for its advocacy as well and its advice over these last 4 years. Whilst we've not always agreed on every issue, I think that shared dialogue between our government and CEDA has helped make us a better and a stronger government. 4 years ago I stood before you as a humble opposition leader, if any opposition leader can in fact be humble, a little younger, a little greener, and perhaps a little less grey as well. But for everything that has changed since then, I think perhaps there's been no greater difference than the sense that now, finally, Victoria is moving in the right direction. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on the politics today, but I would ask you to cast your mind back to that time in 2014. It's important, I think, to reflect on just how far we as a community and an economy have come. The impact that a different style of leadership and a different type of government can have. Because back then, just 4 short years ago, things were very different to what we enjoy today. Our state was at a standstill. Victoria's economic performance was among the worst in our nation. Per capita GSP was going backwards, shrinking by some 0.2% in the 13-14 year. The worst performance of any state in our nation. But it wasn't just those headline economic numbers, it wasn't just those metrics that saw us doing so poorly. I'll give you a few examples. 4 years ago, our ambulance response times, so the ambulance to come when you need it most, were the worst on the mainland. The government at the time was at war with our paramedic workforce, but it didn't end there. We had an elective surgery waiting list with 50,000 Victorians languishing on it. It was the highest ever recorded. And in 2014, in just the 1 year, just one single year, TAFE enrolments went backwards by fully a third. TAFE was cut, campuses were closed. It beggars belief, really, when you think about it now, how any government of any political persuasion could make those sorts of decisions in the middle of what was undoubtedly a jobs crisis. Under the previous government, some 69,000 Victorians lost their jobs. Industries were leaving or closing or offshoring. And the government's response to those realities was to cut training. That really does make no sense at all. Regional communities felt the worst of this. Some 6,000 regional Victorians joined the unemployment queue. And look, I will admit freely that not all of the circumstances that government, or indeed any government, faces are ideal. Some things are beyond your control even, whether it be a high Australian dollar, transitioning industries, international uncertainty. All of those things can throw you off course. They are challenges that must be faced by any government. But I think everybody in this room knows and understands so well that in the face of those challenges, and in fact others, there's no excuse for doing nothing. And there's certainly no excuse for making things worse. Governments are not excused from their responsibilities simply because times are tough, things are challenging, things are beyond your control, you're not excused from that fundamental obligation. You simply aren't. You're not excused from rolling up your sleeves and using every single day to back local industry, to grow local jobs, particularly in the catering industry, to create a strong state, a stronger state, one that has confidence and resilience, and one that can be rightly hopeful about its future. That's exactly what we've done. Never wasting a moment, never wasting a day, using the great gift that was given to us 4 years ago, and acknowledging that with opportunity comes obligation to get on and get things done. Get on and get things done. That is our culture, and that is our record. Now, the record in many respects speaks for itself, and I don't want to go through a big brag list, although I can if you invite me to. Those economic stats I mentioned before, among many, 4 years on, they could not be more different. And you know this because you see it in your balance sheets, you see it in your world, in your part of our economy, you're part of our broader Victorian story. You see those change circumstances, those much more hopeful numbers reflected in lots of different ways. Today, our economy is growing at the strongest rate of any state, with Victoria boasting a 3.3 annual growth in GSP against a national growth rate of just 2%. That growth and that confidence is reflected in every aspect of our Victorian economy. We lead the nation in dwelling starts, construction work, and of course business investment, which is a great metric for confidence and certainty, has increased by 15.5%, the largest increase on the mainland. All told, this and some other things mean an extra 340,000 Victorians are in work. 340,000 jobs have been added to the Victorian economy in just the last 4 years. 340,000 Victorians and their families who have the dignity and the security and the purpose of work. But our efforts are not just limited to the economy, as important as that is. Instead, over these last 4 years, we have made sure that the benefit of our economic success, the benefit of the strength and resilience in the Victorian economy actually translates into better outcomes for every single Victorian, sharing that prosperity, sharing that good fortune with the broadest possible number of people. That takes many different forms. To give you some examples from our point of view where those rewards are best summarised. 70 brand new schools, 70 fully brand new schools, and a program that is currently rebuilding and fixing and upgrading 1,300 other schools. And because we believe in every Victorian getting the care that they need, the importance of health care, wherever they live, we have made record investments right across our health and hospital system to treat more patients than ever before and to provide better care. 4 years after ending that war on our paramedics I referenced earlier, we don't have the worst response times on record. We in fact have the very best ambulance response times since records were kept. We also, I think each of us experience in our own way. You can walk down any street, almost any street across our city and state, and see firsthand the progress that we are making on our transport network. The infrastructure program is very obvious. It is unprecedented, and it is making a very real difference. One of the biggest commitments that we made back in 2014 was a promise to remove 50 of our most dangerous and congested level crossings. Things that really should have been got rid of many, many decades ago. We set ourselves an ambitious target. We said we would have 20 of these things gone. From a standing start, we'd have 20 of them gone by the end of this year. That was an ambitious target and no doubt would have caused some nervousness amongst the public service at the time. Today I can tell you that we haven't just reached that goal, we have smashed that goal. There are 26 of these terrible, dangerous and congested relics of the past that are gone, and we may even be able to get a couple more done before the end of this year. So we are fully ahead of the commitment that we made. We're also upgrading every regional passenger rail line across our state. We're fixing suburban and regional roads. We're building the Westgate Tunnel and the Metro Tunnel. The Metro Tunnel is a project that's already fully 12 months ahead of schedule. Once that project is complete, it'll run dozens of new trains that are being built by Victorians here in Victoria to benefit our community. And if we are re-elected at the end of this year, we'll also get on with that next big project, the North East Link, that vital missing link in our road network, a link that will allow traffic to move around the city instead of being funnelled directly through the centre of it. Across all of those projects and many, many more, there already, I think, is a very compelling case that this has been perhaps the busiest time our state has ever experienced. There's lots of different ways to measure that. In many respects, my preferred metric is of those 340,000 jobs I referenced earlier, 75,000 of those jobs, 75,000, are directly attributable to the road, rail, hospital and school infrastructure agenda that our government has funded and pushed on with. 75,000 livelihoods depend upon that, and we couldn't be more proud than to play our part in driving confidence, to play our part in setting the tone and creating that momentum that so many in the room today have been talking about. These infrastructure investments are some $13.7 billion this year alone, just this year. They mean that across the state there are cranes in the sky and shovels in the ground, and that's very important for all of us. Activity and energy, the likes of which we have never before seen. But, as you all know, that can't be exceptional. Far from it. That kind of pace needs to become the new normal. That means that we have to double our efforts, and particularly double our efforts in relation to skills, because investments in skilled workers are critically important if we are to continue the infrastructure building agenda that I think we are, as a community, impressed by, but we also understand just how important those investments are for the future. Because we want Victorians to fill those roles first, we have to invest in our vocational education and training system. That's why we are not just repairing the damage that was done to our TAFE system, we are making TAFE better than it has ever been. It's why next year 30 priority courses and 18 pre-apprenticeship courses will be absolutely free of charge, removing that barrier to getting the training that individuals want and that we as an economy and a community need. These courses will focus on the skills that Victoria needs most, building infrastructure projects, responding to family violence, caring for older Victorians, and of course, as part of the NDIS, caring and supporting those in our community who live with a disability. While the previous government cut TAFE in the midst of a jobs crisis, we are making TAFE free in the midst of a jobs boom. That's a powerful contrast, and one that I think says a lot about values and the type of government we have been compared to our predecessors. We have made that choice, and of course Victorians will make a choice of their own in just 100 days' time at the end of November. It is, in my view, a contest that will be fought on three fundamental questions. Who's got the runs on the board? Who's got the big ideas for the future? And who's actually got the guts to get on and get things done? On the first, I will let our record speak for itself. But there is no doubt that our city and our state needs big ideas, big and bold thinking. The status quo, I don't think, will cut it any longer, and nor will the politics of the past do in this modern period.
The 1990s are well and truly over, and so too should be 1990s thinking. We should never, we can never, go back to the days of austerity, of cuts and closures. We should never and we can never go back to the days of free market free-for-all, of big corporations taking advantage of ordinary families, of governments sitting back and watching as the economy stops working for working people. Instead, we need big ideas that guarantee a modern, strong and growing Victoria. But to get there, we need to think big and we need to build big. And governments need to have the guts to make big and bold decisions, instead of waiting around for that fabled, universally popular project. Those projects don't exist. And the fact that they don't exist doesn't excuse you from the obligation to get on and get things done. That's why over these next 100 days I'll be laying out a positive plan for Victoria's future. At the centre of this plan will be the biggest transport building program in Australian history. Because we can't slow down, we in fact must double down. That's why a re-elected Labor government will undertake an investment in road and rail, the likes of which has never been seen in the history of our state and our nation. A building program that will stretch over decades, creating new industries and tens of thousands of direct jobs, and building the modern, moving, connected Melbourne and Victoria that we all need. Because that is the real answer to growth. Not telling people where they have to live, but connecting everyone, no matter where they live. We should never forget, however, in the midst of all of these positive economic statistics, the optimism and the buoyancy of our Victorian economy, we should never forget that things are getting harder for working families across Victoria. Costs keep going up, while wages remain relatively the same. All the while, politicians on both the left and the right argue over ideology and, sadly, ignore the facts, the lived experience of so many families across our state. While the experts, for instance, tell us that renewable energy will bring prices down, our opponents promise to scrap Victoria's renewable energy target. Their colleagues in Canberra are little better, promising billions of dollars of taxpayers' money to support coal, all while at the same time requiring and demanding a hands-off approach to economic management. It is hypocrisy at its finest. Because while household electricity bills rose by 20% in the last year, AGL pocketed a $1 billion profit. That's nothing, though, compared to Energy Australia, whose profits in fact tripled. You don't have to be an economist to realise that something is broken. We were promised that a privatised electricity market would lower prices. Wrong. Privatisation has not worked. It's only made things harder for families across Victoria. These everyday expenses, in the thousands of dollars, expenses that can't be avoided, are growing faster than wages. For a carpenter on $60,000 a year, or even a teacher on $75,000, that's a very big impact on their household budget. And if you're a receptionist, say, earning $40,000 a year, these price rises, this unfairness, might not just mean putting off a holiday, it could mean putting off the Christmas presents for the kids, or braving through the winter knowing you can't afford to put the heater on. Something has got to change, and that will take some big ideas too, because the scales need to be reset. Privatisation and deregulation has gone too far. We will tip the scales back in favour of the consumer, not the corporation. Now, I promise you, I'll have much more to say about these issues and many other issues over the next 100 days. And I'll be taking solutions, practical, positive solutions, to the November election. Because we want to fight, of course, to protect everything that we've achieved in these last 4 years. But just as importantly, we'll be fighting for Victoria's future, for the big projects and the big ideas that our state needs. That kind of energy and action has been our record to date. It's who we are, it is the culture of this government and its record. If we are given the great privilege, that greatest gift of a second term, that will be our promise for a further 4 years. To never waste a day and to always work hard to deliver for all Victorians. Thank you very much.